Good morning. Keep coming in. Yeah, I like this. I feel like most of you are enjoying that middle to back. And so the great thing about me, I'm not tied to any wire. I mean, I can just go back here. And it'll be like you're on the front row. It'll be really incredible. Hey, before we get into today, I really want to say about next week, because I know, and no worries here, I know that like we're not all like, every Sunday church people. Like for some of you, this is your once for August. Don't come at all in September if that's you, okay? But come next week. Here's why. It is no matter how long I've been doing the sort of weekly sermon stuff, it is still the hardest thing that I do. Out of all the leadership responsibilities I have, it is still. But every now and then, I feel like God just drops some massive grace in my life. And if there's ever a time that I need massive grace, it's when I'm riding my bike up the hill in Noe Valley where I live. Okay, I'm lying. I don't ride that thing up the hill. When I'm walking my bike up the hill, I'm still needing a lot of grace. And I literally felt like in a matter of 30 seconds, God gave me the whole talk for next Sunday. It does not happen like that usually. Okay, those of you that aspire to get into this that's not the usual. Normally it's about a 25-hour process, but just gave me the whole thing. And here's the thing that I want to talk to you about why it's important for you and anybody in your life. I believe that God has given me a message for next Sunday about how he is in the business of bringing dead things back to life. Dead marriages back to life, dead faith back to life, dead dreams back to life, dead health back to life. And so I just feel like he's laid that on me. I can't wait to deliver that. I'm excited about this week's message too, okay? It just didn't come that fast, if you know what I'm saying. But bring a friend next week, guys. If there's anything that our world needs in these times, it's that God can take something that looks so and dead and bring it back to life. Is that not true? So whether you look at suicide and whether you look at Middle East and just the insane stuff, whether you look at Ferguson, Missouri, whatever you're looking at, things look bleak, and we need to know that our God, with our faith and with his authority, can bring dead things back to life. And so if you can't be here next week, please get the podcast. I really believe it's one of those like special for us anointed things from God. So that's next week. As Tim just mentioned, Tim's definition of few weeks as far as us being in the new building, I don't want you guys to be marking your calendar for 3 to 4 weeks from now, okay? By few, Tim means few compared to how many weeks it's been in the process. But hopefully we're certainly less than 10 weeks away from moving into our new space at Epic, okay? That's what he means by few weeks. And just so you have that straight, again, I would just clear off your October calendar. If you do that, I imagine one of our first Sundays in that building will happen in October. So I think we're less than 10 weeks away. It's going to be massive. And, once we signed off on the architectural design of the new space for our church, I was so excited for things to get going, for progress to be made and work to start. I don't know, anybody else like me, like something should take a long time, but you want to see if it's done right now? Like I'll tell my staff, hey, here's a 2-week project. I go to their office 17 minutes later, I'm like, hey, do you have it done? Anybody else, you have a boss like that? Now you're never going to work for me. And so we sign off on the architectural plan, and they're telling me that work has begun. And so for every few days, or at least once a week, I would go into our new space, and I'm ready to see some progress. Walls going up, rooms being framed, carpet being installed, and so on. And so I would go in there, and everything looked the same week one. Like, that's all right, they're going to get it next week. So I go back next week, and best I can tell, there's not been a change whatsoever. I go back for the third week, and everything still looks the same to me, but what's odd is there are plenty of construction people working in that space. They're there, and they're actually working. They're not just sitting around eating or whatever. They are working, and yet to me, it looks like there's been no progress made whatsoever. Now, in reality, it wasn't true. There had been progress being made. There had been studies done. There had been surveys taken. There had been actual digging below the surface of what was going on. While I was focused on wanting to see progress, thankfully, you should be thankful, our construction crew was focused on making sure that our foundation could support all that Ben wanted to see done in that space. right? And so when you and I, for the next 10 years, experience hopefully tons of things that God's going to do in that physical space, you must remember, whether we ever see it or not, that the foundation those guys have taken the necessary time to put in will enable it to support all that we want to see God do in that space. Does that make sense? Like, Ben, we all know how this works. Foolish you. Well, that's true. That's true. And while we'll never be able to see the foundation, likely, we'll be really excited for the things that can exist in there. You know, when it comes to my life and when it comes to your life, I believe most of us, if not all of us in this room, we want to live fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful lives, don't you? This is not the time to shake your head no, okay? Unless somebody in the room is looking to hire an average employee or, average volunteer or whatever. We all want to live really meaningful lives, but here's what's we need to recognize. Many of us in this room have foundations that can't support the lives we aspire to build. Okay? We just do. And we'll discover this as we go along the way. Well, Jesus, having the carpentry background that he had, he understood that when you're building something, the foundation, just like our guys down the street, the foundation is crucially important because whatever is going to be on top of the foundation will only be held up and sustained if there's a proper foundation. Jesus knew this from his carpentry background, but what he does is he uses this imagery to teach us about how to build our lives. And here's what he says that we'll see in just a second. There's a way that you can build your life in such a way that it will be, it'll show you to be a wise builder. There are other ways to build your life in such a way that it will show you to be a foolish builder. Okay, and I want you to see these words from Jesus in Matthew chapter 7. If you have a Bible, if not, just raise your hand. We'll get a Bible into your hands and you'll see the page number and we'll move on from there. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24 through 27. If you need a Bible, keep your hands up. We'll get one to you. Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. Let's stand and read this. I'll read this to us. Short passage, but it's packed with a lot of weight, a lot of things that we should give consideration to. Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. Here's what Jesus says. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. You may be seated. Short text, but I think profound implications for us this morning. Thrilled that you're here. It's been an exciting summer. It's always exciting when people start coming back, though. I know our kids start school tomorrow. Some of you are in that. Some of you are like, Ben, I'm in the real world. We don't get breaks like that. But you get to travel across the planet. It's terrible you. I know you have to reset your clock and jet lag. But anyway, many of us are back, which is fun. And if you just look around, you can see why we're going for a little bit larger room within the next, hopefully, 8 weeks. So that's really, is foundation shaking? Anybody? In this text, Jesus asks a question, essentially. And here's the question. What are you building your house on? He didn't mean your house. He meant your life. What are you building your life on? What is, and again, you don't have to answer out loud. It's not one of those kind of churches in case that's what you're curious about if you're a first timer or new to Epic. What are you building your life on? And is whatever you're building your life on, whatever the foundation is, can it support the life that you're aspiring to build? When you think about your dreams, when you think about your hopes, when you think about your passions and what you want to pursue with the rest of your days on earth, are you aspiring to build a kind of life that actually can be supported by the foundation that's currently undergirding your entire life? Or do we need to rethink about what our foundation is that we're building the rest of our lives upon? Jesus says in this text that every single one of us are building our lives on something. Okay? And so you're in this room, it's not possible if you were to be asked, what is the foundation of your life? You don't have to tell me, but it's not possible for the truthful answer to be, Ben, I don't have a foundation in my life. Jesus doesn't give that as an option in the text. He lets me know, he lets you know, he lets his original hearers know, every one of you are building your life on something, and you are building it on something that will in the end show that you are a wise builder or a foolish builder. Now, everyone in the room would be like, Ben, I want to be a wise builder. Well, let's see if you are a wise builder before we finish our time this morning. Jesus begins to talk about foundations, and then he talks about storms. Do you see that in the text? But Jesus is not saying that only people who build their lives on the wrong foundation will be the people who encounter storms. Look at the text. Just glance back over it if you have your Bible still open to Matthew 7, 24 through 27. He doesn't say the differentiator is when it comes to storms is that if you have the right kind of foundation, no storm. But if you have the wrong foundation, you will experience lots of storms. Who does he say is going to experience storms? Every single person, regardless of what they are building their lives on, is going to experience the storm. Look at this. This is for everybody. Look at the text. He says this, for all of us, the rain is going to fall, the floods are going to come, the wind is going to blow and beat on whatever life you build for yourself. That there's no amount of money that will keep the storm from coming. There's no amount of vitamins, thankfully, if you ever forget your vitamins. Anybody? There's no amount of vitamins that will keep this storm from coming in your health world. There's no amount of how great you can be to ensure that a relationship will last the way it's supposed to last forever. There's no way to keep storms from coming in my life or in your life. So the differentiator isn't that some people will get the storm and some people will avoid the storm. The differentiator comes in what we choose to build our lives upon. What we choose to build our lives upon. That will be the great differentiator for us. So the question I have for you is, when it comes to the foundation of your life, is it able to hold up and is it able to hold you when everything else unravels? Last fall, we did a series here at Epic titled When Life Crashes. And let me encourage you to go to the website and just check out those messages. 7 weeks, I think, September, October last year. You can get to our video page, and When Life Crashes was the name of that series. And we saw God do some really powerful things in our church community last fall around that idea as we looked at the life of Joseph. And here's why we saw some powerful things. The series was not titled If Life Crashes. The series was titled, the same thing that Jesus is saying here, When Life Crashes. Because for every single one of us, things are going to happen. And you need to be honest with yourself this morning and just ask this question, am I building the kind of life I'm building on a foundation that is able to hold me together when everything else falls apart? Okay? Am I building my life, the life I'm aspiring to build, is it being built on a foundation that actually holds together, it actually keeps me together even when everything else unravels? Is it the kind of foundation that can weather whatever storm comes your way? Can it weather any economic storm? You're like, Ben, have you seen my bank account? The storm is not coming there. Just wait. Can it weather the economic storm? Can it weather any relational storm? Like, oh, Ben, we haven't had a fight. Been dating for 3 days, and we don't do that. Just wait. Can it weather any employment storm? I know your industry looks real secure today, but 10 years from now, this thing's turning so fast. Can it weather any family storm? Can it weather any faith storm? There are going to be things that are going to happen that are going to bring a doubt and faith storm into your life. Can what's holding you, can what's undergirding your life, supporting your life, can it actually hold together? Can your foundation hold tight in the midst of a death or health storm? Can it do that? I want to let you know a couple of ways to distinguish between wise builders and foolish builders. Here's one. A foolish builder is self-sufficient, while a wise builder is dependent on God. A foolish builder, self-sufficient. They can handle it. They're smart enough. Their IQ's high enough. They have experience enough. They have connections enough. They can handle it, and so they build their lives on their own self-sufficiency. But a wise builder builds their life on the sufficiency and on dependence on God. Here's what the psalmist said in Psalm 127, verse 1. It's a verse we quote around here a lot because we want to be a part of something that God's doing. And here's what he said: unless the Lord builds the house, Those who build it will labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. And here's the thing. If you want to live a life that doesn't depend on God, that doesn't need him, that doesn't need his support and doesn't need his help, you will build a life on a sand foundation. But if you and I want to depend on God, if we want to lean into God when it comes to the purpose of our lives, if we want to do things God's way and live a life that will be supported by God, then we live a dependent life, and it's on God, not on ourselves only, on God, and that's the kind of life that's built on a foundation that's a rock. Are you building a life that's going to be built in vain, or are you building a life that will matter, that will count, that will last? Well, how you build and what foundation you build on actually determines the answer to that question. Another difference to note is this, that a foolish builder is super cool with Jesus being a part of their life, but a wise builder makes Jesus the entire foundation to the rest of their life. You see, many people in the scriptures, when Jesus would encounter them, they were really cool with him being a part of their life. Do you remember this? Right? The Pharisees were they were okay with Jesus being a part of their lives as a good teacher until he demanded a little bit more. Do you remember this? There were rich people that Jesus would encounter, and they were okay with Jesus being a part of their life as long as it didn't affect the rest. And a foolish builder is cool with Jesus having a corner, but a wise builder wants Jesus to be the foundation to everything else that they're going to aspire to build in their lives. Do you want to be a foolish builder or a wise builder? And again, remember this, we all fall in one camp or the other. We're building our lives in a wise way, or we're building our lives in a foolish way, and how you're building your life really, really matters. How I build my life really, really matters. I want you to see a text in Ephesians chapter 2. It'll be on the screen. Paul, who did so much church starting in the first century, one of the churches he started was the church in Ephesus. And when he writes back to this church, I think we'll go through this book next summer, but he says a lot of amazing things, but he talks about this idea of what it means to build our lives on Christ as our foundation. Here's what he says. Look at Ephesians 2:19 through 22. I think we'll have it on the screen as well. Here's what he says about the whole building thing. He says, "So then, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole structure, being joined together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord. In him," that's in Jesus, "you also are being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit, by his Spirit." So listen how amazing this is. Paul's saying is that as you and I build our lives on Jesus, as you and I have Jesus as what he calls the cornerstone, other authors have called Jesus the chief cornerstone, the main foundation of our lives, as we build our lives on Christ as our foundation, it says that at the same time, Jesus is building us into something beautiful together. Isn't that cool? Because you're like, oh, I've got to be the builder. You're not the only builder, okay, Bob? With me? All parents of preschoolers are like, I'm with you, Pastor. You're not the only builder. That is, you build on the foundation that is Christ. He is building something beautiful together. And remember, he's writing to the church. So this is an individual letter. He's not saying, hey, Ben, I'm going to build something beautiful just among you. He's like, no, to the church universal, Jesus is building something that we can be a part of. What is he building, Ben? He's building a place between us, in us, where Christ can dwell. It's pretty amazing. What are you building your life on? Are you going to be shown? Because here's what's going to happen for all of us. In the end, whatever we've built our lives on will reveal whether or not we have been wise builders or whether or not we have been foolish builders. So we really should give some weight, no matter what your spiritual persuasion is or how often you do the church thing or what your thoughts are about Jesus even existing. Every one of us in this room should really give weight to, what am I building my life on? If we're all building it somewhere, we really should acknowledge where we're building it on today. I think Jesus tells us what the secret is to being a wise builder. Look at verse 24, the very first part of the text. He says what? Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a, yeah. This is so easy, Jesus. I'm in. Jesus says something that sounds really simple, like there's just this one thing you have to do. But I don't know about you, but I don't find this to be so simple. Anybody else? I've got other things I want to do. I don't know that I trust that really his thing is true and that it's best. But he says, if you hear these words, so there's this hearing piece, and then there's this doing piece. And I think when you think about Jesus' earthly life, he was all the time coming up to people. And essentially, if you think about this lens here of foolish or wise builder, rock or sand, I think Jesus was constantly in his life coming up to people in a very gentle but demanding way, saying to them, I want to encourage you to quit building your life on sand and start building it on rock. Think about the woman at the well. Maybe you know this infamous woman. John chapter 4, she's there, and she's a Samaritan woman. And Jesus comes to her because he's thirsty, just physically thirsty. And he says to this woman, he says to her, you have had 5 husbands. Okay? You're now living with a man who isn't your husband. And what he says to her is that life being built on some man, some relationship, I have to have another human being as a soulmate for me to be fulfilled. That foundation, sweetheart, that is sand. And he says these words to her, if you will embrace me, I will give you the kind of water that will cause the deep thirst in your heart to go away. Come build on the rock. When you see Jesus oftentimes going up to the Pharisees, if you don't know who these guys are, they're just the religious leaders in the first century. And you would think that if Jesus would have said that anyone was building their life on the rock, it would be these religious leaders, right? They're so religious. Certainly that's what God wants. But he was constantly coming up to the Pharisees and essentially telling them this, guys, you're building your life on following a set of religious rules and you're making that the name of the game. That itself is sand. Instead, why don't you build your life on the rock? I am the embodiment of all the things you say you believe. I'm here and you're looking for paper. The God in the flesh has shown up and you've rejected me. I am rock, that's sand. And they just continue to build their religious lives on the sand. What are you building your life on? Jesus came up to people like Zacchaeus and the rich young ruler and other wealthy people, and he said to them, hey, nothing wrong with wealth, but it doesn't make a great master. You don't need to build your life on that. It is beautiful sand, right? It's beautiful sand, but it's still sand. Why don't you build your life on where true treasure is found? Build on the rock. Even last week, we see Jesus telling his disciples, don't build your lives on the world's understanding of power, prestige, and privilege, and authority, and leadership. Instead, build your lives on the rock. I bring a new sense of what we do with authority, what we do with power, prestige, position, leadership, and authority. Why don't you build your lives here? And that's what Jesus is constantly doing. Now, I want to give you a little bit of warning. A little bit of danger, I think, that's present in many of our lives in this room. Many of us in this room are building our lives on sand, and we're telling ourselves it's rock. Say it again. Many of us in this room are building our lives on sand, and we're telling ourselves, we're not intentionally lying to ourselves, but we're telling ourselves it's really rock. It really can hold up everything we aspire to build. And there are so many foundation temptations in the world, are there not? And they make such great promises to us. If you make money the foundation, it promises that it will take care of every problem you have. If you make relationships the foundation, it'll tell you you'll never be lonely again. This is everything your heart has ever needed. If you make pleasure the foundation of your life, it'll tell you that you always win because it's always about you and how you feel. If you make comfort the foundation of your life, then you never have to do the hard things. If you make approval the foundation of your life, then everyone's going to applaud you when all is said and done, which isn't true. Right? If you make the success of your kids the foundation of your life, guess what? They're going to let you down sometime. But all of these things promise, whatever you want to build on, they all have this promise, and the promise is this: no matter what you face, I've got you. Okay? So money says, you face anything and we'll take care of that, because it takes care of a lot, does it not? Not everything, though. Relationship, it says it'll take care of you no matter what. Fear, comfort, pleasure, all of these things promise us things that they can't deliver. And I think the first thing you've got to do is just acknowledge, what is your temptation when it comes to what foundation you'll build your life on? Let me just give you a couple of mine. One for me is that I'm tempted to build as the foundation of my life my ability to be successful in my role here at Epic. Right? I can literally tell myself, Ben, if you do that thing that people said was going to be hard and whatever, and look at how it's happened in 3.5 years, I literally can have this as the foundation of my life and think somehow that it's going to hold me up in the end. Guys, I love the job that God's given me. I thank you that I have the chance to do it, but in the end, it's not going to hold me up. It doesn't have the power. It wasn't intended to. It makes a terrible foundation. Another thing I'm tempted to build as my foundation in life is the need for approval from everyone else. I know it's only me, but it's my thing. I'm tempted to just live as a foundation. You know what, Ben? If everyone else applauds, like, who even cares? Everything else is good. You're in. You matter. You count. Doesn't matter what everyone else does because you have approval. What is your foundation temptation? What are you tempted to build your life on because someone or it itself or in your mind you've told yourself that at the end of the day it will hold you up? And I think what we have to do this morning is to name our thing. I think what you have to do in your heart, you don't have to do it out loud. Thankfully, this is not a small group. Not that you have to do that in your small group. All of a sudden, small group signups have just gone down. You don't have to say anything, all right, till week 4. Just kidding. Just kidding. But you need to, in your heart, name your foundation. And the way that I think you can do this is just by answering this question. And again, just in your heart, like, hey, what's the functioning foundation for my life? What have I told myself that if I have this, everything else will be fine and I will be held up no matter what I encounter, no matter what I come against? So if it's amassing wealth as your foundation, just name it in your heart. If it is having everyone's approval, if it is much accomplishment and achievement, if it is doing very religious things so God will give you what you think you're owed, whatever the foundation of your life currently is, unless if you and I want breakthrough this morning, we must name where it is today. So where's yours? Where's yours? We've told ourselves that it would hold us up. We told ourselves that it mattered most. We told ourselves that it made us bulletproof. We told ourselves that in the end, it would work, whatever we came to encounter or face. And at the end of the day, what we need to do after we name that is we need to just be honest, which can be hard, even amongst ourselves. We just need to be honest this morning and say, I told myself it was rock, but you know what? It's sand. We just need to confess that. It sounds good, but it's just sand. Now, how many of you have ever been to terrible, terrible, terrible beaches? Like you were offended that it called itself a beach. Anybody? Come on, seriously. You don't pick right every time. We've all been to beaches that were just terrible, right? Maybe something like this. Like that's ugly, right? Aren't you offended that would call itself a beach? It's ugly. And so some of you are building your lives on this kind of beach, this kind of sand. And it's obvious to you that you're in an unhealthy place. It's obvious to everyone around you. We can all see it. That's bad sand that you're building on. You should stop that. Isn't that obvious? But how many of you have been to beautiful beaches? Anybody? Maybe something more like this? The white, powdery sand that doesn't get hot regardless of the temperature outside. It's beautiful. I know where I'm standing this morning. I know what lots of wealth and affluence looks like. I know what lots of achievement looks like. I know what high intelligence looks like. We're sort of in the epicenter of so much of all of those things. And it makes it a lot more dangerous because many of us in this room, we're building our life on beautiful sand. Beautiful sand. And everyone around you would go, why would you build on anything else if you have this? But let me say this to you. With love and grace, but truth. Friends, it's still sand. It's pretty, but it still won't hold the weight. It's pretty, but it's still not a worthy foundation. We just need to be honest with Jesus this morning and say, you know what? It seems so wise, Jesus, to build my life on this beautiful sand. But I want to agree with you this morning. It's foolishness. And what has to happen with whatever we're building our lives on, not only is it the foundation for our life, but it also sits on the throne of our lives. And we want to, as many people in the first century did, we want to say that we've got a number of things on the throne of our lives. And Jesus would constantly say to us, no, you've just got one thing. What is it? And so what you've got to do with whatever you've built the foundation on that is sand, what we've got to do this morning is to dethrone that. We've got to, the word from the Bible here is repentance. And it's just that visual and physical idea that in our hearts, our minds, and with our lives, we walk away from whatever sandy foundation we've been building on and we turn away from that and we turn to the God who actually is the God who can hold it up. The God who, when he gets involved, it's not done in vain. The God who, when the storms come, the foundation remains stable. Do you see what he said at the end of verse 27? Jesus said, for the one who builds on the foundation of sand, the floods are going to come, the rain's going to fall, the floods are going to come, the wind's going to blow and beat on that life as well, and the fall of it will be what? It'll be great. That's not great in a good way, okay? A great fall. A devastating fall might be the best translation. We sang some words from an old hymn in one of our modern songs this morning right before this message, and these were the words, so fitting, I think. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground, no matter how ugly or how beautiful it is, no matter what it seems to promise, all other ground is sinking sand. You will build your life on one or the other. In fact, you're doing that as I speak. And I just want to encourage you, along with myself, let's renounce the sandy way and move into what the foundation is made of rock. And what I want to encourage you to do, I think someone close to you needs to know your struggle with this. Someone close to you, not the stranger, okay? Sometimes it's easier to tell the stranger on the sidewalk, though, isn't it? Someone close to you just needs to know, like, hey, either I'm tempted to build my life on this thing, which is actually sand, or I'm doing it right now. Maybe you're part of a small group of friends or a small group Bible study here at Epic or whatever the case may be. I mean, you need to sit in this web of relationships and just say to one another, hey, can we try to live our lives in a way that actually matters, in a way with a foundation that's going to hold us up regardless of what we're going to face? And by the way, just a little bit of pre-advice, it'd be better to build a foundation on the front end before the storm comes rather than try to build it in the midst of the storm. Okay? I'm just encourage you, do it on the front end. It's never too late. So if you're in the middle of a storm right now, change foundations. But for those of us that maybe aren't in a storm right now, let's make sure we have a foundation that can carry us into it, through it, and on the other side of it, because the scriptures say it is coming. And I want this for you. Next Sunday, we're actually going to have a baptism opportunity in all three of our services. And I think what baptism does is make this great declaration to our community of faith here at Epic, just to say, hey, I have been living my life trying to build it on a foundation that's sand. And today, I want to say, I'm with Jesus. I'm going to build my life on the chief cornerstone, and I am changed, and I'm willing to declare that to the rest of you. If that's you. You can sign up for that on your card. We'd love for you to take that step next week. Last thing I want to say before I pray. Let us be a people who refuse to do what the world tells us to do and what these things promise to us they'll do. You've got to refuse it because it's coming at you, okay? It will be on me before I go to sleep tonight. I'll hear, oh, this was the attendance. I mean, look at this 10:30, Ben. You're doing awesome. Build your foundation. Look, I mean, there's seats in the back. People are standing up. Babies are wondering where they can go. I mean, it is crazy. You'll be tempted to also. You'll be presented with an opportunity this week at work, and you think, oh, I'm so content right now. Just wait till that offer comes. I didn't say don't take it. Just don't put it as the foundation. There aren't enough zeros when it comes to money to be an adequate foundation. There aren't enough beautiful men or women out in the world for them as a relationship to be an adequate foundation. Jesus, the scriptures say, everything is for him and to him, through him. In Colossians, Paul writes to the church at Colossae, and he says that all things hold together in him. You and I want a life that will hold together. It will only happen if we build a wise foundation. Pray with me. Band's going to come up and lead us in just a song of response. I think one that declares what our heartbeat is. And I want you to know in this room this morning, you will not be able to build a life on a solid foundation alone. And that's why we push things like small groups and community and serving teams. That's why we say to you, hey, share this with someone. Where are you going to build your life on? What are you going to build it on? Jesus, I thank you for this teaching. I thank you for the insight. I thank you for not letting us just build our lives on sand until we get to the end, but you're interrupting us this morning saying, don't keep doing that. Don't keep doing that. And I thank you for that. Jesus, I've got friends in this room, super successful people, very smart people, lots of experience, very influential. God, they have a lot of opportunity to build their lives on beautiful sand, and I just pray that they would reject that. God, I've got other friends in this room who are building their lives in really terrible ways. They're allowing addiction and habits and sin to overcome them. I just pray that they would run from that as well, but not just run away from it, but run to you. Jesus, we don't want to be fools. And every one of us has this tendency in us to do what's easy, to look to something or someone to promise us something that they actually can't deliver on. And I just pray we would remove our hearts and lives from that, and we would look to you. You can deliver. You have. Those things promise stability. They aren't as stable as you. They can't deliver like you. They aren't as certain as you. And so I pray that we would just pursue you. We would turn away from those things. We would turn towards you, and you would give us the resolve, the strength, not just to feel this in a moment, but to live it out as things come our way this week. As we hear about opportunities, as we meet people, as we think about our futures, I just pray that our lives from here on out will be built on you as our foundation. In your name, I pray. Amen. Let's stand and respond.